Hey everyone, welcome again to the BATTASS podcast, the Batman the Animated Series show podcast, where we talk about Batman the Animated Series. My name is Clay McCormick, and with me as always is Sean Murphy. Sean, how you doing?
How you doing, man? You know, before we start, I have to apologize. I'm very good at what I do. You don't get that from the very first part of the episode, do you?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Shit. Oh, man. We can restart this if you want, but when Ubu first attacks Batman in the Batcave, Raish's line is, "I'm really sorry about Ubu. He's really good at what he does," which makes no sense.
Oh, okay. So then it fits then, because that didn't make any sense to me.
It wasn't my line. Blame Denny O'Neil.
I'm saying you delivered it with the spirit of the original.
Oh,
so,
I see, yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
So today we're talking about the two-parter introduction of Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, depending on the show says Raish, the movies say Ra's. Who's to say? Demon's Quest Part 1 and 2. And we'll take a quick break and we'll get into that. Demon's Quest Part 1, written by Denny O'Neil, directed by Kevin Altieri. And in that one, when Robin is mysteriously abducted from his college campus, Batman begins a fruitless search until he is astounded by the sudden appearance in the Batcave of Ra's al Ghul. Ra's quickly reveals that his daughter Talia has been abducted under circumstances similar to Robin's, suggesting that the same people are responsible. So begins an uneasy truce between Batman and the demon. And in the second part, which is story by Denny O'Neil and Len Wein, teleplay by Len Wein, after freeing Talia from her father's clutches and escaping from an avalanche, well, they really assume that you figured out the ending between the two of them there. Batman and Robin follow the only clue they have, the word Orpheus. After discovering that Orpheus is Raish's private satellite that will orbit over the Sahara, the duo travel to the Demon's desert stronghold. There, Batman learns that the satellite is actually a weapon which will explosively destroy all the Lazarus pits simultaneously throughout the world, destroying all life that exists. Part 1 is a direct adaptation of Daughter of the Demon from Batman number 232 in 1971 and The Demon Lives Again, Batman 244, September 1972, both by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, famous for introducing Ra's al Ghul. The second half is also a direct adaptation of both of those comics. Okay, I didn't need to read that twice. Anyway.
I'm actually glad to know that they're based off of comics, because that explains why these two episodes don't really have much to do with each other. Even though they try to convince you that they do. Yeah.
I would be really interested to know, I guess it's a split between those two issues, because it's Batman 232 and 244. That's like almost a year between each other. And they're both Ra's al Ghul issues. So I don't know exactly what they're pulling from one and what they're pulling from the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, these two episodes are really weird, because it surprises me actually that they're saying it's taken from two separate issues, only because between these two episodes, I feel like the first episode moves really, really, really fast. They just like cycle through a whole bunch of stuff. And then the second episode is a little bit slower. So it feels like it could have been part of the same story, but they needed to have the break happen at a very specific point, which is the reveal of Ra's al Ghul as the bad guy. So they had to shuffle through the first half as quickly as possible, and then the second half is a little bit more laid back.
Yeah. I remember as a kid liking these two episodes. I don't like them now. I was really disappointed and surprised by how much I was not enjoying them. I like I think the guy that does Ra's is amazing. I think Ra's as a character is well animated. The whole thing is well animated. Great action scenes. Different kind of episode than you normally get. Like, I do appreciate the stuff that the episode is doing well. Especially love the score. The music in it is very Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, definitely.
But like, I don't get why they had to go through all this trouble. Why Ra's would kidnap Robin and pretend to kidnap his daughter just to put Batman and test him through this gauntlet just to see if he was worthy. I just don't know what that really gets you. And I know it's based off a comic, and maybe back in the 70s that was enough, but I don't know. I'm just not into it.
Well, it's kind of this weird, twisted Willy Wonka story, isn't it? Where you've got Ra's al Ghul, who's at the end of his life after 600 years, and he's trying to give the keys to the candy factory. I'm not sure whether the candy factory is in reference to the League of Assassins or his daughter in this case.
Or his daughter. His daughter's candy factory.
Yeah. But, he's putting Batman through the paces to see if he's worthy of taking this thing over. And it feels like a long way to go for that particular ham sandwich.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't. Oh, one question I have before we go any further is the League of Assassins mentioned in this? Did I miss it?
I honestly don't remember. I would like to think that it is because that's sort of his thing, but it's possible that it's not.
Yeah, I don't know why. In the first episode with that ended with Ra's al Ghul, it was Vertigo, I think it was, and it had Talia in it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they were fighting against the League of Assassins, so I know that they established them in this universe. I thought that Ra's was involved with the League of Assassins, but I don't think that if he is, they certainly didn't make it clear in these 2 episodes. And it makes a lot of sense for him to be connected to this stuff because he has a bunch of henchmen all around the world. He's got a bunch of secret bases and buried in mountains and all that stuff. He has a satellite. Like, why wouldn't you say to Bruce, I want you to take over as me. I want you to jump in the pit and live forever. And then you can use all these assassins and all of my money and my infrastructure to keep it going. Because at least that would, I don't know, that seems like it would be kind of tempting for Batman. Is you could be Batman forever and you have all these assassins which suddenly would be doing good things instead of bad things or whatever.
Yeah. For as much of a genius as Ra's al Ghul is made out to be, he doesn't really take a very smart approach to try and convince Batman he should take over for him.
Right. And even though he's designed to have this sort of old school chivalrous way of looking at things, that doesn't even explain why he goes through all these strange hoops just to do whatever he's doing.
Yeah, because like if you're getting to the point that you think that Batman is going to take over, could take over for you, you would think that you would already be past the point where, can he defeat a panther if he's locked in a room with a panther? Like I feel like at that point, he's capable, what he's capable of. And so the trick is now how to convince him that this is the way to go, not to like put a gun to his friend's head and say, you take over for me now or I shoot him.
Yeah.
That's not going to convince anybody of anything.
Yeah. I mean, if Batman's not worthy, then who the hell else would be, honestly? You've got a billionaire who's got a secret identity, who's single-handedly trying to save, whatever it is. I feel like he should have just come to Batman and offered him the job. In fact, I think episode 1 should just be completely redone and make it more about the backstory of Ra's al Ghul as Batman investigates him. And you can even go through history and see Ra's, I don't know, surviving different time periods and then finding each Lazarus pit one after the other, building his infrastructure, whatever it is. That would have been, for me, like one way to approach episode 1. So that when you get to episode 2, things are explained a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. If I were, I would say, I think part of my problem is how rushed the first half feels. And I think what might have been a better angle is because they're trying to, Ra's is trying to keep up the charade for a while, and it's pretty clear from the get-go that obviously he's the guy behind it, even if you've never seen the episode before. I wish that they hadn't revealed him so early. So I wish that in sort of like a Yoda thing in Empire Strikes Back, where it's like he gets this thing that Robin's been kidnapped and so has this other woman that he knows of. So then he has to go on to try and capture or get them back. And on this mission, he runs into this person who, when he meets him, is playing the aggrieved father or whatever. And then it turns out that, oh, no, this guy is Ra's al Ghul. He put the whole thing together, et cetera, et cetera. So when you've got Ra's al Ghul acting undercover, for lack of a better term, you can have him working Batman to try and working Batman like from an intellectual point and an emotional point to try and get him to, when he finally offers him the job, you've already worked on him mentally to a point where you think maybe he would come around to it instead of just, so like he's still going through all these trials and stuff, these physical trials, but he doesn't know Raish is behind it. And Raish, being the unassuming victim, can sort of work him from the mental side while he's being worked from the physical side. So when you get to the end where he reveals himself, he's like, then he can kind of lay it out for him. That way, it's just it's a little bit more intriguing. But I think that takes a lot more time to do. Right. And you got 30 minutes. You got to establish who this guy is as quickly as possible. I was surprised how fast he shows up, though. He just
walks into the back.
Yeah, he's like he walks out of the background like he's been there for a while. Like, was he waiting for Batman to come home? Did he get there early with Ubu and just be like, let's just stay in this corner,
right,
until he gets home at 6 a.m.
Yeah, I feel like there could have been more interesting ways to introduce Ra's al Ghul in this.
Yeah.
I do like that he figured out who Batman was, because not only does he have his daughter's description, but he looked at a bunch of receipts and figured out which billionaires on the planet were ordering things things like batarangs.
Yeah, he does.
Let me see. Who ordered a bunch of batarangs from Amazon? Bruce Wayne. Wait a minute.
And he never threw that bat-themed party he was saying he was ordering them for.
I know.
Yeah, he does the minimal amount of legwork it would take to figure out that Bruce Wayne is. It's either Bruce Wayne or like the Gotham City equivalent of Bill Gates or one of those guys, and it's like, no, it's probably gonna be Bruce Wayne
or a big giant Batman fanboy who just likes to pretend he's Batman.
Right.
Which I guess is kind of what Bruce Wayne is anyway. You could argue.
Yeah, I guess it depends how they write him, because sometimes they write him as someone who's against Batman. But yeah, he's generally like, well, I heard Batman was pretty cool.
I feel like them getting Robin in his dorm room is a little funny.
It is. It's really funny.
It's pouring rain out. Really well animated. It's super dramatic. Robin goes back into his dorm room, dressed as Robin, with a grappling hook or whatever, and then he's taken out by three guys who are creepily waiting in the corner of the room wearing masks.
That's what they do. It's like they get there and they're like, now we shall wait in this dorm room for, I don't know, an hour or two. We'll give him 2 hours, and then we're bouncing.
It's like, you think you're bored now? Wait until tomorrow. We have to wait in the Batcave for 2 hours until Bruce Wayne shows up.
We've been here for a long time. I can't wait to shoot this kid.
Who brought the trail mix? I'm hungry.
You can't eat through that. You can't eat through that mask though. That Osiris mask.
You can't. It's like
Anubis.
Dark Helmet in Spaceballs.
Yes.
You have to tip it through the mouth hole.
Yes.
I want to go. I don't know, if I was directing this series and I heard about this episode and what it was going on, I would go into the meeting and be like, all right, guys, listen. I know you want to do a James Bond, Indiana Jones thing. You got a lot of ideas for action pieces, and you definitely want to work in Ra's al Ghul and have him offer his empire to Batman. That's the stuff we need to keep. But Jesus Christ, you need to fix the first episode here. You need to take a look at why is Talia so fucking weird? Does she loves Bruce, but she's happy to watch him die, and there's this weird, he reminds her of her father type thing, and then at the end, Batman kisses her. How does that make sense?
Yeah, and they go, we've seen her once before this, and she was sort of sultry and cool and sort of Catwoman-y and stuff, and in this one, she's just head over heels in love with Batman, which I don't know why that's the case.
She's massively underpowered here. Feminism would hate this episode. I mean, obviously, Raish is a very sexist character, but Talia doesn't do much to do. She even says so when Raish goes into the Lazarus pit and comes out, he's temporarily insane, and she allows him to pick her up and delay between two episodes until she finally smacks him in the face. She's like, "Oh, don't worry, this always happens." Really, why don't you just get a baseball bat and every time he comes out of Lazarus Pit, you just knock him around for a bit until he remembers who he is.
Also, the Lazarus Pit thing, they're he's completely insane. The Lazarus Pit drives you completely insane, and then all she does is shake him fairly lightly, and he's like, "Oh, Oh, sorry, I don't know what came over
thanks.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. So then the pit, it will kill you if you're not dying. If you're about to die, it'll save you.
Yes.
Okay.
Until the end of the episode.
I'll leave that alone. It's a kid's show.
Yeah, until the end of the episode where they break that rule by dropping a Ra's al Ghul returned to full health back into the Lazarus pit.
Yeah.
But
I mean, yeah. There's just so many questions that this raises, you know?
Yeah, the Lazarus pit has always been a big question mark as far as what it can and can't do. And
yeah.
But yeah, speaking of Talia, it's I was surprised at her characterization because I know in the comics that's kind of her deal is that she's, in love with Batman. Mm-hmm. But I never got the feeling that she was in love with Batman like a high school girl is in love with someone. Or like, I always thought of it more like a we are equals and that's why we should be together kind of thing.
Right.
And in this one, I was kind of the way I probably would have played it is I would have had Talia be very upset that this was happening to her because her father is pulling this, chauvinist bullshit, trying to turning her into a damsel in distress in order to hand over the keys to the kingdom to Batman, whereas Talia is very capable, and she should be mad that he's not handing over the keys to the kingdom to her.
Yeah.
And so then at the end of your episode 2, after you've had them butt heads in X, Y, and Z, she falls in love, for lack of a better term, with Batman because she sees that he is her equal, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
works.
you can build it that way instead of turning her into just like a prop.
Yep, that works too. I was looking at other reviews too, so I was just curious if I missed anything. So I looked at Tor and AV Club, and they were both very generous to this episode. I was pretty surprised. Like they gave it like A- equivalent.
Wow.
And I'm like, what episode were you guys watching? Because normally my opinions of episodes generally line up with those websites, but this one I was like, no, like they really love the sword fight in the end. The shirtless sword fight got a lot of points.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, get that shirt off of him sooner.
Yeah. The amount of disguises Batman wears in this, like he wanders around without a shirt for most of the episode when he can easily dress up like one of the henchmen and disappear again, you know?
Yeah, I thought the disguise thing was really funny because I assumed when he gets captured at the end, he's in disguise as one of the henchmen there. I assumed it was going to be one of those things where Ra's al Ghul was like, I see I knew you were here the whole time, Batman, and then they pull the thing off. But no, he doesn't know it's Batman until they pull the mask off of him. He's acting as though like one of his henchmen just decided to get a conscience or something. And then they pull the mask off and he's like, I had no idea it was Batman.
Yeah. While we've been talking, I've been thinking about what I would do with Ra's al Ghul if I had to do a Ra's comic. And off the top of my head, I thought, I love the idea that he's ancient Egyptian, whatever. I know he's got the Fu Manchu thing, so maybe he's, from certain parts of the Middle East. I don't know, wherever. You know?
Just to solidify the stereotype, sure.
So let's say the Lazarus Pit is a thing. Let's say that it was worshipped by this ancient civilization, and they didn't have science back then, so they didn't know what the hell it was, and he was some kind of a king or whatever. And then he got really unhappy with the kingdom and what they were doing to nature, so he decided to destroy the civilization and thereby protect the secret of the Lazarus Pit. And he is the only one that really knows about this pit. And after that, he goes around the globe finding more and more Lazarus pits and building the League of Shadows and, being in charge of the whole operation. He never allows anyone to test it. He has like a religious belief in it that this is like the nectar from the earth and this keeping me alive because it wants me to stop mankind and end this virus called humanity, like that sort of thing. And then like he destroyed the ancient civilization in the past, he now wants to destroy this new civilization, which is the world that we know today. And Batman gets wind of this plot and tackles it like that. Like, that's kind of the direction I would go. But yeah, they didn't do anything close to that.
Yeah, I've always been kind of iffy on him as a character because, like, he's one of those characters that I think is better in concept than when you really get to the nitty gritty of what he's about. Because I actually didn't even realize that he had this I mean, first of all, his plan is the same plan as, or I should say his goal is the same goal as Thanos in the Avengers movies, where he wants to eliminate half of all life on Earth. I guess.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. And
he counted out a number too, like did research, and he literally says like 3,499 in one baby.
Yeah. And I find him, I didn't realize he had this return the Earth to its natural state thing. And I don't really know if that's, I like the way that they handled him in Batman Begins quite a bit, where the League of Assassins or the League of Shadows or whatever it is an agent, sees themselves as an agent of progress, where they have to, when an empire gets too big for its own britches, they have to go in and destroy it in order to make sure that it can build itself back up and like doesn't, I don't know, destroy humanity.
That's more that's more plausible for sure.
Yeah, and I find that more interesting. Because I think Ra's al Ghul works better as like, when you see him, he's got a lot of presence, and he's when anytime they reveal him as being like the mastermind behind something, it always works for some reason, because he's got this like gravitas to him. But when you when you kind of dig into what he's about, it's kind of, I don't know, it's essentially like Poison Ivy with a sword.
Yeah, no, he does have a lot in common with Poison Ivy. I mean, there's two Ra's al Ghul takes. There's the one that you just talked about, which is the League of Assassins guy, and then you have this eco-terrorist type guy, which is a lot like, Poison Ivy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually wondering if they had ever teamed up, because I feel like if they really got their shit together and they really wanted to do this, take over the world, destroy mankind, and let's give the planet back to the trees, they could probably give it a good shot,
Yeah. I assume they must have crossed paths at some point. She's
a woman, so there's no way he'd want to, acknowledge her power, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing, that he wouldn't want to work with her to begin with. But he originally was first appeared in Batman number 232, which is what this episode was based on.
Yep.
And he's an international mastermind, criminal mastermind, whose ultimate goal is a world in perfect environmental balance. I just never realized that was his thing, and it kind of bums me out a little bit, because let
me ask you a question.
It's so arch.
Let me ask you a question that will get you can dive into your flat Earth stuff, because I think there's a connection here. So he was created partially by Neil Adams, correct?
Sure.
Neil Adams is not a flat earther, but
no, he's the opposite.
It's a shrinking Earth?
Expanding Earth.
Expanding Earth,
I believe,
okay.
Yes.
What do you know what that means? I don't.
I don't know. I'll tell you. I went one of the first. Oh God, I probably shouldn't tell.
Wait, you talk. I'm going to look it up, and that's the way I can give listeners something to see if I can find some.
The first comic book convention I ever went to was a show in New York, Big Apple Comic-Con, and I was just walking around with a friend of mine, and we went to. They were doing a sit-down discussion with Neil Adams and Frank Miller. And so we both went to that, and it was awesome. And, they talked for a while, and it was a great conversation. And then when it was over, the moderator said, "Hey, you guys don't go anywhere. Neil wants to show you guys a video." And I was like, "Oh, cool. I mean, this must be something new that he's working on. Maybe it's some new artwork or something." And it was not. It was a video all about the expanding Earth. And I think I made it maybe like 2 or 3 minutes until we bounced out of there. I gave it a shot. But it was it was a weird thing to pull on a captive Comic-Con audience.
So the expanding Earth, so you know how we have continents, right?
Sure.
All the continents kind of fit together like puzzle pieces.
Sure.
Well, Pangea, in this theory, used to cover the whole planet. It was all one big solid landmass. Mm-hmm. And as the oceans and the Earth below the continents expanded, all the continents started cracking and turning into islands and then pushing apart from each other. Mm-hmm. There's a photo on Wikipedia that's actually really helpful. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I'm describing here? All right, so I guess my question is, because Ra's al Ghul, created by Neil Adams, who thinks that the Earth is expanding, part of Ra's backstory is this Lazarus pit, which comes from the Earth. Mm-hmm. And it has to do, like, when the sun and there's a line in the episode where he's going to blow it up exactly when the sun and the moon align because the gravity is going to be at its strongest in one direction or something like that.
Sure.
There seems to be a lot of stuff in this dish that seems to be very Neil Adams centered. I'm wondering if any of his beliefs in the expanding Earth have anything to do with how Ra's al Ghul was created.
Oh yeah, I have no idea. I mean, maybe some of that stuff snuck in there. I don't know when he first started to subscribe to the expanding Earth model.
Yeah.
But that was the other thing I didn't realize about him is how Bond villainy he is. Like
Neil Adams or
well, I mean, when you see him at a convention, you have to pass through a series of trials to get to his table. So kind of.
It's true.
But no, the Ra's al Ghul, he's very Bond villain, and he's got this really kind of arch idea that it would sound great being told to James Bond while he's strapped down to a gurney with a laser at his crotch or something.
Yeah.
And that kind of bums me out too. I don't know. I guess I don't. I guess what I'm learning here is that I never had a solid grasp about what Ra's al Ghul was about, but I liked the gravitas and the mystery. And the more I learn about him, the less I find him interesting.
I think that there would be a way to do a cool story of explaining the Lazarus Pit. And I wouldn't want to explain how it works. I would like to keep it like a religious mystery.
Sure.
And focus on his history and how old he is and how he's destroyed civilizations in the past. Like there'd be a way to weave together the two versions, the Batman Begins version and then this eco-terrorist version.
Yeah, there's
definitely a through line.
They have definitely done that stuff in the past. They've gone into the history of him over the 600 years. I don't know if exactly what you're talking about has been done, but they've definitely dipped into that stuff in the comics. Yeah. Yeah, I don't. It's tough to talk about this episode because I feel like we're both kind of down on it.
Yeah,
I thought the animation in spots was really nice. I didn't think the animation in the first half was very good. It felt kind of stiff.
Yeah.
And the second one felt a lot slicker. Like a lot of those fights in the first half felt really, really stiff and choppy.
Yeah, I thought it was the same animation house that did both episodes, but I could be wrong.
It might be. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but it's just for whatever reason. Honestly, this is going to sound weird, but I think it might have been different places. And the reason I'm going to say this is because I noticed that Talia loses a couple cup sizes in the second half. Not that I was looking for this, but she was drawn in the first half as like excessively busty.
Yeah.
To a point where I was like, I don't feel like they usually draw these characters like this. And then in the second half, she seemed much more on model for like the Bruce Timm style.
Yeah, the Bruce Timm style is a girl that has B cups or A cups, like very thin with larger hips.
Right. And
she was definitely busty in the first one.
Yeah. And so I feel like they must have used two different groups for the first half and the second half. And it just, the first half, the one thing I really enjoyed, and not to jump right to the what would you draw part, but may as well, I guess. I really liked that Panther fight. And I think that would be a lot of fun to draw because the way that they were handling that stuff with in the dark room with the lighting and the Black Panther, I think that would be really cool. That would be a lot of fun to try and do.
So, kind of a side story here. I'm doing a book with my friend Blake Northcott for Catwoman. Mm-hmm. It's just 2 issues. It's being drawn by this artist, Kian Torme. We'll go Torme. And the idea is that Catwoman, to get back to her roots, is in a South American jungle trying to help these villagers who, like Blood Diamond type of scenario, right? Mm-hmm. And there's this legendary cat that's roaming the rainforest, and it's mostly killing the bad guys, which is convenient. And there's this little kid with the cat, and Catwoman sort of meets up with them. So it's like you have this giant female Black Panther, you have a 6-year-old who's riding on top of the cat like He-Man style, and then you have Catwoman who's like loving this because this like gets her back to her roots. You got 3 strong female characters all together, taking down the bad guys or whatever. And I did 2 covers, and I drew this. I think it's a black jaguar. It's a certain type of jaguar that does exist in South America, and or is it a leopard? I forget, but it's so black that it basically reads as a panther,
Sure.
even if it's not. Anyway, so the artist drew this thing like 3 stories tall. Kean, if you're listening to this, I mean, I've sort of mentioned this to him already, and I'm not really in charge of it. It's sort of Blake's baby. I was kind of just like getting it started and giving her ideas, and she read the script and all that. So it went from this like large jungle cat that a 6-year-old could ride, which would maybe it's a little larger than in real life. But the way the artist drew it, it's like, I'm not even lying, it's 3 stories tall. Because if Catwoman stood up and she's 5 feet tall, this thing has got to be at least 2 stories. We'll call it that. So I wrote into the team, and I'm like, hey, it looks great. You know, Kean did a great job drawing it, and he really is amazing. But I wasn't sure who gave him the note to draw the cat so huge. And I seemed to be the only one that cared about it. And the stuff I got back was, well, it's a comic, so who cares? And then the editor says, well, maybe the cat's superpowers is it can grow really large. And I'm like, okay, but is that in the script anywhere else? Like, am I the only one noticing how large this fucking cat is now?
See, that's the note I would give as the artist, because I wouldn't want to redraw it.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how it's going to go. I don't even know if readers will care. That's the kind of thing that would bother me, but I'm not the prospective audience for most comics, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, it depends how it plays in the book. So is the cat like, if Catwoman was standing next to the cat, would she is it taller than her entire person?
Oh yeah, her head would hit the bottom of its stomach.
What?
Yeah, like it is.
That's
like a bus.
That's a big cat. I thought you were exaggerating a little bit.
No.
All right. Well,
if you do the perspective, like if you, and I love perspective, and a few panels where she's standing near the cat. If you judge by where everything is, this cat is, it's like the size of a huge elephant.
Cool. Sure.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of like, it's one thing to have the bad guy go, oh, there's this cat in the forest, it's killing my men. We have to go down there and take care of it. Send a couple guys to go shoot it. Well, if he knew the thing was the size of an elephant, you think he'd have more of a story about it.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
So,
did the earth open up and the Lazarus pit just created this giant bus cat?
Well, I guess if it's like supposed to be this legendary ancient cat, it would.
Right.
You could go like, all right, well, maybe like a saber-toothed tiger. It's a little bit bigger than a saber-toothed tiger kind of thing. That would make sense.
Exactly.
Sure.
You could have, if we had room in the story to talk about, well, let's address why this thing is so huge. Is it, if it has mystical powers, why don't we explain that? And I don't think there's I don't know. We'll have to see. I haven't read the final draft yet, so maybe Blake came up with some dialogue to explain it away. But watching this leopard scene or this panther scene or whatever it was made me think about that.
Yeah, I guess it's gonna have to depend on how it plays out, because if it's like just a cat the size of a Mack truck that nobody's really addressing the fact that there's this gigantic cat there, but if it's like believably bigger, like believably ancient cat bigger. Yeah. So who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. Oh, so the other funny.
So you're
thing
you're saying don't buy it when it comes out? Is what you're saying?
No. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, I got to use the original Catwoman costume from the animated series in it.
Oh, sweet.
We had to do covers. Well, I had to do covers earlier on for solicitations. So I was trying to figure out like which Batwoman costume do I use. And because it's a standalone story, I'm like, well, why don't I use the gray and black one from the animated series? Because I think that one's like my favorite anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, and so I threw that in there, so it's cool. I mean, it is a standalone story. I think it's coming out in a few months. I don't know exactly.
Oh, excellent.
I should know this stuff, but I got all confused about the whole project when I saw how large the cat was. Like, where am I? The other funny bit of it too is in the story I wrote in. Well, I had Blake write in a Lamborghini Countach, which is that awesome car from the '80s. And there's a whole talking heads scene where the two characters are inside the Countach talking. And the artist complained to me. He's like, "Man, this car has no headspace, so I don't know how to draw this so that you can fit all these word balloons inside." And I'm thinking, dude, it's a comic. Don't draw the top of the car. Just put a bunch of word balloons. Like, there's a million solutions for this. And I thought, wait a minute. Suddenly you're interested about like size and relationship to objects, and here you are drawing a cat that's like 2 stories tall.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, suddenly you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's a comic book. Make the top of the car 30 feet high. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. That is not what I meant.
Also,
man.
I mean, the Lamborghini Countach, that car that's great in the South American jungles.
It's paved. It's like he's got a resort kind of a drug lord type of guy.
I mean, I would be happy if it was a Countach just tearing through the jungle with not making any, with like chains on the wheels or something. That would be fun.
That's true. Like cutting all of the trees with its pointy nose.
Yeah, there you go.
Because the car is so awesomely designed. Yeah. What would I draw? I would draw maybe the sword fight.
Batman.
Yeah. It was funny when I was doing Curse of White Knight. I do have a sword fight in the finale, and I wasn't sure if I should have Bruce without a shirt on or Azrael. The idea of like these guys are broken down to their bare essence and they're still hacking it out. Like it's not just because we want to see Batman's awesome six pack, but I thought there might be a storytelling benefit to him not having a shirt on or something like that. But in the end, I just had him ditch the cape. Ditch the cape.
Yeah, and I mean also you can't top Neil Adams drawing Batman without a shirt on, covered in chest hair.
Yeah. Did he have chest hair?
In the comic, he does. Yeah. In the show, he does not. Apparently, chest hair is too difficult to animate.
Yeah. Who wants to be bothered with all that? Yeah, I believe it. I honestly, I'm not fully thrilled with how I drew the final fight scene in my book. I think I was just running out of gas and tired. And I had that rapier built, so I had an actual sword in my studio so I could see how the swept hilt looks from different angles. Like I was doing all the proper setup for this whole thing.
And you needed to make sure you used it. You needed to make sure you used it just in case the IRS called you.
Yeah, no, I definitely did, but I feel like as I go through these old Zorro comics, I can see like, man, these sword fights are done so much better than the way I drew them. Like I'm looking back at old panels like, oh man, I think I want to do another sword fight scene and get it right this time because I'm just not happy with what I did. So yeah, if I wanted to draw something in this episode, it would be the sword fight, just so I could redeem myself from the finale of Curse of the White Knight.
Did you feel like you drew it too stiff, or you weren't getting the motion across, or?
Yeah, I feel like it's a good question. Wish I knew how to answer that. I feel like the best sword fight scenes in comics have minimal detail in the background. If you do a lot of detail, it just loses the impact of a slash of a sword. But you don't want zero backgrounds either. And there are some panels where the hilt of the sword looks really goopy. I feel like I could have put the camera in a better place to show the full swing of the sword, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have a lot of little nitpicks and stuff. And, it doesn't help that, Azrael has a two-handed claymore, basically, and Bruce has two rapiers. And I even took fencing lessons for 8 weeks just to learn how to sword fight a little bit and how characters stand. And I ended up redrawing some stuff because sorry, this is getting long-winded. I drew some stuff with Edmund Wayne back in the day where it looked good on a comic book panel, but his stance was totally not correct to how you would use a sword like that.
Yeah.
And I think I just got in my own head, and I just had too much going on.
Maybe he has some sort of magical sword fighting power that allows him to fight well while standing that way.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? If it's in a land of magical giant cats, then sure. I guess anything goes.
I actually wanted to ask you, did you? Because I believe the last issue of Curse of the White Knight came out after they started shutting down stores because of
it came out the final day, the last Wednesday the shops were open.
Oh, okay.
My book
did you find or notice that there was any impact on the reception? Or maybe even, I guess it doesn't impact sales because the sales are to comic stores, not from people buying the books themselves.
Yeah.
But
it's too early to check the numbers on that issue. Maybe they're out now. I'm not sure yet. So I don't know exactly how much the sales were. But I did notice, the oxygen in the room was taken out the next day by, so usually I get a bunch of YouTube reviews that I can look at and see if people like it or not. And I noticed that they were noticeably absent because I think people just had other things going on.
Right. Understandably, yeah. I'm curious you're the only person I know personally who had a book come out in that weird gray zone, and obviously it's not the most important thing in the world given what else is going on. But I was curious as to whether or not it was on my mind because it was the final issue, and it's like it. I wonder if it felt anticlimactic to be building up to this final issue and then kind of be like, we've got other real world stuff going on. We'll come back to this maybe when the trade comes out.
So, I looked at all the reviews. There's a comic site called Comic Book Roundup, which I think I mentioned before. And generally my reviews come in between like 88 to a 90%. It takes all these website reviews and it shuffles them in, and I'm pretty consistently getting like a B+ to an A- rating, which I'm really happy with. However, I noticed that there was a dip in the final issue, and I think it's down to some of my readers loved it. They think it's like such a good sequel to the first one. They still think it's like an all-time Batman story, and they're not bothered that Bruce is going to jail or that he's not really a Wayne or all this stuff. Like they get what I was going for. And then you have another type of customer that just doesn't see what the big deal is about what Bruce's ancestors did 300 years ago. And I knew that was going to happen because I know that you and I were talking about this.
Yes, like, quite a bit.
Because like you were like, how does it really matter? I mean, what legal recourse? It's like, here's the equivalent. Anderson Cooper is a giant celebrity or whatever in New York City, right? He is a Vanderbilt. So think of him as Bruce Wayne in a way. Let's say that Anderson Cooper owned a bunch of buildings and he was like the prince of New York City in a lot of ways. And suddenly he found out that his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather murdered somebody in the 1600s and took over their identity. So that Anderson Cooper is not actually a Vanderbilt, nor are any of the 6 generations leading up to him. Who would really care at that point?
Yeah.
Like, would that make the news? Sure, absolutely. That's an interesting story. But would someone like, who would take him to court? What would happen to his fortune? Like, what do you even do at that point? Obviously, it's past. You have to wait for I forget what it's called. Statute of limitations has to have some effect on this. Like, I have no idea. And you and I were talking about this when I was writing Batman, and I finally came up with the idea of like, well, forget about all that stuff. I think it would really bother Bruce Wayne. And I do really believe that. But a lot of my readers did not get why that was such a big deal. So I don't think that they like the ending of Curse as much. Yeah. But some of my readers really did get that, and they liked it a lot. So
I always thought the key to making that stuff work was just filtering as much of it as you could through Azrael and just making it seem like to Azrael, that shit would matter absolutely. Like he's an insane person who's being driven by quote unquote God to reclaim his birthright. That that makes sense as to be a drive for him. But yeah, finding a reason for Bruce to really care is tricky. And I think ultimately the more or less what he finds out at the end, that he's more than what his name is, et cetera, is the best way to wrap that up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know I was really pushing for a lot. I know other writers have taken away Bruce Wayne, and they ask, is Batman still Batman? And then other writers have taken away his fortune. They've, done other things to make you ask the question, is he still Batman? And what I tried to do is take away him being a Wayne at all, and everything that he has used to become Batman is basically stolen. And what would that do to him? So if you're the type of reader that doesn't enjoy reading stories from the 1600s, you're not going to love this book.
Right.
If you also don't care about Bruce not being a Wayne because it has to do with something that happens in the 1600s, again, you're not going to care. And at the very end of it, you're going to see Bruce Wayne go to jail, which is also kind of a bummer. So honestly, I'm surprised my reviews were as high as they were, considering I was asking readers really to accept a lot. But I did notice that they dipped, and I've been trying to put together in my head not what went wrong, because I think I did a good job pushing the kind of story I tried to push, whether or not it's for everybody.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I've always thought that that's the most important thing. Just tell the story you want to tell, and people are going to be with you. Some people aren't. If write the story, tell the story that you want to tell, that is of the book that you want to see, and there are going to be people who follow you on that journey. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, and you look at like these famous directors. We were talking about David Finch the other day, and all these great David Fincher movies.
David
Fincher.
Finch is the comic book artist.
Sorry. And I was talking about The Social Network, which I didn't love, and I thought it was probably amazingly well done, but it's just not my type of story.
Sure.
But I thought, like, man, David Fincher is like a director's director. He tells the type of stories that he wants to do. It's usually like a small contained universe where there's like a murderer or serial killer or something. You don't have a ton of characters, and it keeps a very narrow focus. And I thought, well, would he want to be the next Chris Nolan? Would he want to be the next Steven Spielberg?
Right.
Or is he happy with how he's carved out this like perfect little niche? Like, he's more about the art than he is about the headlines.
Sure. Yeah. When it comes to that stuff, I always think about the modern thing that happens now. And I guess it's kind of happened forever, but it seems to be more noticeable now because every movie is a comic book movie, so it gets a lot of press. But some other franchise. But I've noticed in the last like 15 years this trend of someone does one pretty good to really good indie movie, and then all of a sudden they're directing the next Marvel movie.
Right.
Most notably, I remember the guy who directed Chronicle doing Fantastic Four, and there was another one where this guy named David Slade, I think his name was, he directed a movie called Hard Candy, which is a really cool movie, and he ended up doing Wolverine Origins, which is Fantastic Four, Wolverine Origins, not great movies, and you see these two kind of indie directors who kind of have this they're developing this style and this voice thrust into this big machine, and some of them can't hang, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing because they're not all meant to. And I always think of David Lynch, where David Lynch did Eraserhead, and I can't remember if he did another movie before he did Dune, but he did Eraserhead, which is this really dark, twisted, weird nightmare of a movie that is not a mainstream movie by any stretch of the imagination. And then he does Dune, which is a big budget sci-fi adaptation, which is still pretty weird, but it's like it's a studio movie. There's lots of moving parts involved, and it was kind of a big deal, and the whole experience soured him on doing that kind of stuff ever again. And if it wasn't for that, he might not have realized the stuff that he really liked to do, which ended up turning him into the David Lynch that everybody knows, because the movie he did immediately after that was Blue Velvet, which is a lot more in the vein of Eraserhead. And that's sort of been the world that he lives in ever since. And some people just, they aren't made to do everything.
Yeah, you're not. So David Fincher, I'm just going to make some fictional assumptions here. Let's just say, I think he's a brilliant storyteller.
Yeah.
He's a master of his craft, sound design, like everything. I mean, he's got it all. If he doesn't do tentpole movies, it might be because he doesn't want to deal with the politics.
Sure.
Maybe it's just a bridge too far. He just doesn't want to be making headlines like that. He'd rather do smaller projects with Ben Affleck, like Gone Girl, and really control all of the knobs and dials rather than have the suits come in and tank his vision.
Yeah.
Even if that means less money, less notoriety, that's just maybe not what's important to him.
Yeah, and I mean, even a similar thing happened to him, where he did a bunch of music videos, and then he did Alien 3, which is a big budget franchise movie that ended up being a terrible experience for him and flopped. And then after that, the next movie he does after that is The Game, which is, again, he's weird. I mean, this is not a movie podcast, but he's an interesting case because he's always working with big name actors, but he does tell smaller stories. Yeah.
Sometimes I play this game where I think, what if David Fincher was a comic book creator, what books would he be doing? Would he be a DC Marvel guy, or would he be doing Image stuff, or would he be doing, I guess he'd be doing crime comics, probably at Image. And I look at Steven Spielberg and I'm like, what kind of books would he be doing? And what kind of, Michael Bay for sure would be doing X-Men.
Yeah, he would be doing X-Men in the 90s is what Michael Bay would be doing. Yes.
The biggest, splashiest, like most action filled, like that's what he would want to do. And Steven Spielberg would be doing like expensive Vertigo books where he gets a huge budget to do slightly I don't know. Like, how do you even peg what Steven Spielberg even is these days?
Yeah. Because I was going to say I would see Fincher doing a Vertigo books. Like
That's
Seven.
true, yeah.
Seven feels like a Vertigo book. Fight Club feels like a Vertigo book.
Yeah,
that feels like his wheelhouse. But we'll cover that in the
Yeah.
next episode of what comics would these directors draw or write.
Yeah, my head's all over the place this podcast. I apologize.
No, it's all
been a
right.
weird
Yeah,
week.
I mean, I'm not to pull it back into the episode. I am a little surprised that we didn't have more to talk about here because we were both fairly underwhelmed by it, and it's not like nothing happens. Like arguably too much happens, and it's if we want to get into ratings on this, I would. I don't want to. I feel bad giving it a 2.
Yeah,
but I feel like
too.
that's kind of where my head's at on this.
yeah. I'm at a 2 or a 3.
Yeah. I mean,
And it gets points. It's beautiful, and it pisses me off that they wasted a lot of money on these amazing animation sequences for a script that just was not there.
yeah, I mean, like the action stuff is great, especially in the second half. Like the escape from the Lazarus Pit with Batman and Robin is cool. Even that sword fight at the end is cool. The explosions and everything at the compound are neat. But it's just it's not. It doesn't establish Ra's al Ghul as a villain that I am really interested to see again.
Right. Well, I think there's at least 2 more, at least 1 more he's in, which has the Western one.
Yeah,
what's his face?
there's one with Jonah Hex, right?
Jonah Hex. Yep.
Is Batman even in that?
Yeah, he's a bookend.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I think there's another one with Ra's al Ghul. I could be wrong, actually. I don't know.
Well,
yeah. But in general, it drives me crazy when the script is half-baked on anything, including movies. I'm sorry to bring it back into movies. But it drives me nuts that, like, one single shot in Picard costs more money than the entire script put together. And the script is the very backbone that's going to drive the rest of the endeavor. Mm-hmm. It's just so insane to me. Like, it's so easy to fix scripts in a way. It's just moving words around. When you get to the level where you're doing CGI and explosions everywhere, it's like that is like 100 times more expensive than fixing the script. And at that point, you can't fucking fix much.
Right.
I mean, maybe a little bit in the editing room, but it just blows my mind that we spend so much on the effects and so little on getting the script right.
Yeah.
But, if making movies is anything like making comics, you've got politics to deal with. You've got deadlines. You've got sometimes you don't have enough oversight. Accidentally, things kind of slip through, and everyone's too busy to notice that it sucks. Pretty soon, you have animation coming back, and it looks good, and you're like, all right, Ra's al Ghul, I guess this is a thing,
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've been actually thinking about that quite a bit lately in terms of, I don't think making movies is quite like making comics, but I think it's probably closer to, making comics is probably closer to making TV shows. And because, a friend of mine always gets pissed off at TV shows because he's like, why don't they write the entire thing before they shoot it? And it's like, well, it's just the system isn't made to do that. It's an evolving process, and sometimes you kind of have to, you go with what you got. And I was thinking about that in reference to the book that I'm writing and drawing. And I was thinking, man, I don't know how monthly comic writers aren't like either A, nail it right away the first time, or come away from each story arc going, ugh, God, I wish I had done things differently. Because my book is essentially, it's a graphic novel. It's 5 issues worth of comics. And I've got a lot of stuff that ended up in the first chapter that I didn't know I needed until I was finished writing the second one. Like character motivations change and everything, and certain things kind of become more clear to me. Same thing, I just finished writing the 3rd chapter, and I feel the same way where it's like, this motivation doesn't really work, so I think I'm going to have to go back and change what's going on in the second one. And if you're doing a monthly book, by the time you get to the 3rd script, the first 2 issues are probably already drawn. Yeah. And so it's really, unless you're just changing dialogue, it's really it's really difficult to have those sort of late game revelations and go back and fix things so that they flow smoother.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've done that a lot too. with Curse, we had this whole backstory. Issue 2 started out with Edmund and Bakar, and Edmund is being trained as they travel to the New World. And there was a line I put in there that wasn't in the first few drafts, where Bakar expects to get half the land, and Edmund says this is something he's not willing to grant. Mm-hmm. And without that line, that whole sequence doesn't have as much weight, because it's not clear how Edmund feels about Bakar trying to take half his land.
Right.
And it seems so obvious. Like, I did have to go back in issue 5 or issue 6, go back into issue 2 and add that line. And I don't think I told you about it. And when you read the final draft, you're like, oh, that line is actually super important.
Yeah.
Without that line, the motivation, like, there's a lot that's left unclear if you cut that out.
Yeah.
And I think about how many things I've saved as they've gone out the door. Like, right before printing, added a line of dialogue here that covers up a lot of plot holes or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily, that's something you can just cover with a line of dialogue. But I mean, if you get to the point where you're like, oh, shit, I need a page worth of this stuff that wasn't in the first issue, you either got to cover your ass later on and figure out a way how to explain it, or you just got to, eat shit.
Right. Yeah, and I think that when you're doing your own book like you and I are, we're in the rare position where we lord over all of this, and we can see everything. And we know it really is a labor of love, because there's so few cooks in the kitchen. Just you, your letterer. For me, it's my letterer, my colorist or whatever. Mm-hmm. Oh, so you have a colorist too. I'm sorry. Yeah. But I feel like when I see other comic book writers' work, having to like juggle 5 scripts a month, like, your editor calls in the morning, oh, hey, we need you to take a look at this scene because we need X, Y, and Z by the end of the day. Go. And you're like, oh, shit. So you put down the whiteboard that has all your notes of your current project, grab the book that you thought you just finished, try to remember what the fuck you were trying to say in this book,
right?
Do what you think the editor is saying, and like, okay, I hope that's good. And you send it out the door and you focus back on what you were originally doing. But you're doing that with 5 different projects. Yeah. I think that when you pass the baton so often like that, things are going to fall through. And the benefit that you and I have is there is no passing of the baton. The writer and the artist are the same person, so very little is going to get lost. So you and I can really fine tweak those dials like traditional comic book writers just can't.
Arguably sometimes too much, because I've also been there. I've also been there too, where I've been writing something and I've been staring at the same 2 sentences for like 3 hours, figuring out exactly how to word them and which order they should come in and which word should come first in order to express the thought the way that I want it to come out. Yeah,
that's the thing. Is the lesson I've learned too is whatever you put down in the comic, people are gonna get 80% of it at most, if you're lucky. There's tons of stuff that they're going to be so overwhelmed by your drawing that they're not going to pay attention to the dialogue, or they're going to be so into the dialogue they're going to miss something in the drawing. It's not a perfect transition. It's not a perfect handoff.
Right.
Like even with movies and songs, like there's always shit. Even your favorite movies, there's stuff that you miss, and it's not till decades later we're like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Oh, totally.
If the director came in and be like, this was your favorite movie, you didn't know I was doing that? Like, how dare you say you're my biggest fan? Like it's just inevitably, there's always stuff that you're going to miss.
Do you remember when everybody's mind was blown when that first person discovered the thing in Jurassic Park where he has to tie the 2 female ends of the seatbelts together in order to secure himself? And then they were like, oh my God, that's what happens with the dinosaurs too. This movie's fucking... Like, that was like the first movie internet meme I remember, and it blew everybody's mind.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Spielberg was like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
How did you miss that?
It's funny. There's a few, I'm watching a lot of YouTube channels that go over movies and talk about how brilliant directors like David Fincher are. And it was going over Steven Spielberg and talking about a scene in Minority Report where Tom Cruise and Colin Farrell, thank you, are talking to each other, and they're like one side of the screen and you have Farrell on the other side of the scene, and they're just the visually what it's saying is they each are, this is weighing one character against another. The audience is literally in the middle. And in this shot they also have the guy with the blonde hair, I forget his name, he's like, you're looking at the back of his head and he's splitting the screen, and the YouTube guy is talking about why this is such an important shot and this is what it's trying to tell you, and he's reading into it way too much, where I feel like even Spielberg is going to be like, no, actually I wish I didn't have the back of the guy's head right there. That's not at all what I was intending. So some of the stuff that the experts interpret is just them reading into it too much. Yeah. But they do say a lot of important things that are right on. in a lot of cases.
Which is why, if I was ever in that situation, I think I would be one of those creators who just doesn't really get into things. Because if someone comes at me with one of those things, be like, is it true that you intended this image to represent the weightiness of the situation and blah, blah, blah? And I'd be like, I let the work speak for itself, you know?
Yeah.
There's my favorite show, The Prisoner. There's an episode where they're having an art contest in the village, and everybody else draws portraits of the warden number 2, and the main character number 6 makes this abstract thing, and the judges come over and they just lose their minds over it, and they're like, "What's the meaning of it?" And he's like, "The meaning is what it is," and they're like, "Oh my God, the meaning is what it is. It's brilliant." And it's like, that's how I feel about that stuff, where unless they're coming out and being like, obviously this is a metaphor for why Nazis should rule the planet, then I would step in. But as long as it's like that kind of stuff, I'm like, kick it around. Kick the tires on it. Do whatever you want with it.
You know, a nice visual way to describe this argument would be when you see comic book panels broken down and artists will draw on it how they're intending to lead the eye. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you have a character looking to the left, that's obviously where the reader is going to be looking as well. Mm-hmm. Or if the character on the left is holding a sword and the sword is pointing to the ground at an object, you know, there's interesting ways that you can triangulate and sort of lead people through your scene.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of times people will dismiss the lines that are not conducive to the design at all. Like, for example, there was a Mignola panel once, and I saw this breakdown about why, you know, Mike Mignola is brilliant. And, you know, side note, I do think he's brilliant. Mm-hmm. But in this one panel, they explain how this is what he's trying to do. This is how he's leading your eye. And they were taking in all the directional lines, like fences, trees, branches, and swords that were pointing to the point of the panel. But they were ignoring all of the branches and swords that were pointing away from it.
Right.
And worst of all is one of these swords was creating a really bad tangent that was totally, and it was almost like looking at a weather map when you see like cold fronts and warm fronts moving in. And I feel like artists really try to plan where the eye is moving, but inevitably you're going to have a stray sword or an angle somewhere some reader is going to see that first and not be down at all with the way you're trying to lead their eye.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can, we don't have to get into specifics, but sometimes people can read those things the wrong way.
Sorry, this is getting really deep.
Yeah,
into
that's
territory.
all right.
I didn't think we'd get into it with this episode.
We'll pull ourselves out of the Lazarus pit of deep dive comic book theory here, and So you also a 2 on this one?
I'm a 2.
Yeah.
And one more thing, I do want to suggest we should do a podcast one day and talk about how comics are like movies and how they're not like movies.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be
I think
fun.
that would be fun to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that maybe after we finish the season or something. We'll do it as one of those mid.
When the pandemic is over, it'd be nice to have visuals to be able to like point to what we're talking about.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun too. Do like
if there's ever a way to do that.
Yeah, we absolutely could do that. I think. We absolutely could do that. I think.
Assuming we all survive.
Right. But yeah, so that's gonna do it for us for Demon's Quest Part 1 and 2. I keep wanting to say Demon's Head, but it's Demon's Quest. Next time, we are going to be doing Fire from Olympus and Read My Lips. So thank you guys for checking this out. If you like it, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Hit us up on, what are we on? We're on Twitter. That's what we're on. Sorry, my mind went blank. At BATTASS Podcast. That's BATTASS Podcast. If you want to shoot us an email, you can do that at battasspodcast@gmail.com. It's BATTASS Podcast at gmail.com. Thanks so much for checking it out. Thanks for coming on, Sean, as always.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for dealing with my rambling. Sorry to start us off on the wrong foot with a joke that nobody got.
That's all right. Nobody's listening now anyway. So we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks.
Let the good times roll.